as Serena mentioned, I run an organization now called Prospect. And we, on the surface, we're a job board and we aggregate all the jobs available in Canada's Canadian tech startups into one searchable, sortable platform. But on top of that, we also were the creators of the Help List, which was a layoff list service that was built at the beginning of COVID to help anybody who was affected by unemployment, to help find other or new opportunities within the tech workforce and keep all of our amazingly talented people in the tech workforce. I am actually calling in from tiny Ontario. I've been living at my cottage since early pandemic. So the only heat I have here is a fireplace. There's a fun fact.
Hopefully you survive the winter.
Oh, I'm coming back to the city soon. Don't you worry.
Fantastic. So Marianne, we really appreciate all the work that you're doing with our community right now, with Prospect and Help List. Let me, I guess, get started with your own path of being an entrepreneur. What got you to start Prospect, and how's your mission kind of shaped over the years?
Okay, good question. I think the most important thing to start with is that like I said, I had no idea this is where I was going to land. When I graduated from university, which I'm going to date myself, it was around, from my undergrad, it was 2009. Entrepreneurship was not spoken of at my university. I attended Queen's. At least it wasn't spoken of in the social sciences or outside of the business school. Amazing education, but at no point did anybody say to me, you can take this education you've got, you could start your own business. If you have a good idea, you could start your own business. You don't need to go through the commerce program to kick that off. And so I think it was a bit of a longer journey for me to get there, because my expectation coming out of university was really like, I got to get a job. And then I got to work really hard at my job. I got to get better at that job. And then I'll get the next job. I'll get the next job. And then I'll get the next job. And none of that was very clear. For me, how I landed here was I actually did a master's in human rights in the UK, as I mentioned. And I got a little bit jaded I love international development, and I'm an impact-driven person, I think, as many of us are, especially entrepreneurs who want to make a difference. But I got a little bit jaded by how slow moving the international development space was. And so when I landed back in Canada, I worked for a few nonprofits, but my main question was, where can I find the people that are trying to change the world at a faster pace? And that is kind of how the long and the short of how I fell backwards into tech. Fast forward, 8 years, I worked at an accelerator incubator space, managed a meetup group, consulted for and worked for a bunch of different startups. And then while I was working in venture capital, we identified this, I think we've all identified this problem that we have a talent shortage in Canada, despite the pandemic. But the problem was the way that job boards work is because they're a pay-per-post model, jobs are necessarily spread all over the internet based on where companies can afford to put their dollars to help promote their opportunities. And if we were so dedicated to ensuring that we were putting our Canadian companies on the global stage, we should at least make it easier for anyone, whether they are already working in tech in Canada or on the other side of the world curious about moving here. We should make it easier for them to look at and browse those opportunities. And so that's how we started Prospect. We made it this free, fully aggregated job board for the entire Canadian tech industry. The route to entrepreneurship, though, was we built that in the fund. So it was a product in the fund. And so for me, it was an amazing opportunity when we realized, when I was able to scale it to be big enough, we knew it didn't belong in the fund. And so the question was, hey, Marianne, do you want to stay in venture capital, or do you want to spin this out as its own organization? And I mean, I'd been supporting entrepreneurs and still support entrepreneurs my whole career, but this was a great opportunity for me to, finally walk in those shoes and see what it felt like. And here we are.
And how does it feel like, Marianne?
Oh, it's so much work. Yeah, it's exhausting and rewarding. It's curious. You are always learning. You are never the master of your craft. It really is, you have to be passionate about the process, I think. But especially for the work we're doing, which is so impact oriented, it's so rewarding.
That's amazing. So, I guess diving a bit deeper into the work that you're doing there, what is the current state of entrepreneurial talent in Canada?
Oh, that's a big question.
From what you've seen, I know you just put out a report recently, so maybe you could tap into.
Right. So I'll rephrase that a bit. So the state of entrepreneurial talent really refers to, like, the quality of entrepreneurs we have in Canada. I'll comment, I cannot answer that question because we don't necessarily measure that data, but specific to that question, I think it's important to acknowledge how diverse Canada is and how much opportunity there actually is here in this country. I think when it comes to the opportunities for entrepreneurship, we have an incredible competitive advantage on a global stage that is definitely being harnessed, but with the support of organizations like YSpace, like, we're able to actually cultivate entrepreneurship across our country and across all regions of our city, not just focusing on the downtown core, which I think is the biggest area of opportunity. When it comes to the talent in our companies, the state of talent demand, as you mentioned, Nafis, we released a report earlier this year summarizing sort of the state of talent demand in Q1 and then looking a bit at Q2 and what happened during COVID. Unsurprisingly, over 60% of the demand for talent in our companies is for technical roles. That includes software engineering, IT, design, QA, you name it, data science, and 40%, but 40% are obviously for some of, like, I guess, like, the horrible way of describing it is softer skills, but I don't think they're softer, just like non-technical focused roles, marketing and communications, sales and business development, and so on. The most in demand category of talent is software engineering. Not surprising. Everyone on this call, I'm sure, is nodding their heads. But the second most in demand category is actually sales and business development. Almost the same amount of demand as software engineering. And one of the biggest things we've seen emerge over the past, like, 4 years is a greater conversation about the shortage of sales talent available in the Canadian market, specifically experienced sales talent, people who have worked at a tech company, watched it grow up, and are able to reapply those lessons. Unless you've worked at Shopify for the past 8 years, we just don't have access to that pool of talent as much as our US counterparts.
Sorry, I forgot I was on mute.
Okay.
So that seems like a very interesting thing to note on, because I know the Canadian ecosystem has been evolving for quite a bit of time. So having a look at the talent, that's quite interesting to see how the talent landscape has evolved as well. Looking into entrepreneurship and how it's evolved, how do entrepreneurs affect our society, do you think? Especially with the landscape of COVID, there's so much talk about the future, right? Rebuilding the future, rebuilding the economy. So I think it probably is a good time to explore how entrepreneurs can play a part in that. And what do we need from these leaders?
Right. Okay. Also, really big questions. Entrepreneurs drive our economy. People starting new businesses, that is the most, and maintaining and growing those businesses, that's the most, it's the linchpin of our economy. I think when it comes to recovery, what we've been able to see with COVID is that often, specifically with tech, but also I think going beyond just tech, like, large corporations move really slow. I think we all know that. Many of us, no matter what, have, like, maybe had an internship or had a job at a large corporation or have watched our parents work for big companies before. And they just move really slow. They don't move fast enough to respond to a pandemic. And so what we're seeing right now is our government, as well as, like, other organizations, really looking to fast moving, agile entrepreneurs and smaller teams to actually build the solutions we need, because they can move faster. They don't have these big, systems in place where they have 50 different people and processes to approve one stamp on a page. So I think we've seen some amazing things happen in terms of companies innovating in the health tech sector, communications, D2C, even some of the consumer products. I mean, it's amazing to see how we've evolved from a distance. So I guess that would be my answer, is like entrepreneurship helps our economy move faster as well, and helps us move to recovery at a faster rate than some of the bigger institutions could.
Absolutely agree with that. And I think, by that regard, we've certainly seen, based on the companies and entrepreneurs that we're seeing, um, in the early days of the pandemic, there was this conversation of, we don't know where entrepreneurship will go. We don't know how if people will want to become founders or entrepreneurs. But we've certainly seen from our perspective that that hasn't changed. If anything, we've seen more founders looking to build something new and give back to our society. So that's been wonderful to see.
Yeah, and when we built the help list, a lot of people reached out to me and they're like, Marianne, this is amazing. I'm sure you've heard this as an entrepreneur before. When you build something and it starts to stick, it's like, oh, this is amazing. How did you do it? It's like, I don't know. I just did it. Like, I just did it and I didn't think about it. I mean, the big thing is when we launched the help list, I looked at my colleague and I said, like, this could just fall on its face. Like, maybe no one will use it. Maybe someone will use it, but the ability to just make the decision. And also, I think entrepreneurs are far more comfortable with failure, and you should be comfortable with failure. You should be comfortable with the fact that some things just like won't turn out the way you wanted them to, and that's totally fine. That's the thing that allows us to just adapt and really, really think think short term about how we can respond to things.
So I love that you use the words "just do it" because I use that so many times. I think Nike should sponsor me.
I do
if,
too.
if anyone from Nike is joining us, please remember that. But on that topic of just do it. For those of us in this call that maybe haven't started yet, is there a best time to take that plunge?
No. Okay. So no, there's no good time. And the biggest, I guess the greatest failures that a lot of people experience when trying to become an entrepreneur or start your own business or start your own thing is seeing this North Star of the perfect product or the perfect outcome of what you're trying to build, and working so hard to just build that thing before you even launch it. Let's say, it doesn't matter what it is you're building. I was talking to someone recently this summer who was trying to build a supplements company, and she had sourced this amazing, this provider that can do all these holistic supplements. And she had sourced these amazing bottles in China that she was going to have imported. And it was this really big process. And what she's trying to do is like a D2C brand that would mail people supplements that they need. I was like, why don't you just go to Shoppers, buy the supplements and mail them to people? Like, buy the vitamins that you were meaning to combine. And it was that moment where she realized, like, there's stages to this process. You can start today. Whatever your idea is, you can start today. You can start brainstorming today. You can start talking to the right people today. You can even start building your MVP today. It does not need to be perfect, because guess what? It will never be perfect. You will always be iterating. You will always be changing. And the thing that you think you're going to build, in all likelihood, is not what you're going to build at all.
And the amazing part about that is that right now I would say there's such a wonderful community built to support entrepreneurs. Just that conversation with you probably changed that founder's entire perspective and trajectory of how they pursue their business. So there's a wonderful ecosystem, and I know you touched on that. I guess switching it back around to us, how can we as folks or leaders within the ecosystem, how can we support these entrepreneurs to succeed? What do you think is missing for us, especially with the road ahead that we're looking at? How can we change the perspective?
I guess to clarify, so like helping people kick off their entrepreneurial journey, like how can
Yeah,
different organizations
taking off
support?
and growing.
I mean, a lot of, for better or for worse, a lot of entrepreneurial organizations are incredibly biased in how they define what an entrepreneur is, which means at the end of the day, we still, to this day, do not have enough diversity at the table when we're looking at our, entrepreneurship roster. I think the thing that we can do better across the board always is working harder to attract different types of entrepreneurs to the table and inspire people to believe that they too can join a space like Y Space and they too can start their own business. Uh, it is systemic in the systems that we've built that there are expectations that only white men can build businesses. And even though it seems to us like so obvious that this is an opportunity for anyone, it's not so obvious to everyone. And so sometimes it does take a little bit extra effort on our end to ensure we're engaging diverse populations and bringing everyone into the fold. I also think that a lot of our entrepreneurial systems, and I know that this isn't the case for Y Space, but a lot of the different organizations we're building almost skip a couple early stages because they think it's sexier to build a scale stage start incubator or accelerator. It's not. It's actually not. It's way more valuable, way more lucrative to start at an earlier stage, to be supporting entrepreneurs at an earlier stage. And so, yes, we do have a ton of services and out there. It just so happens that a lot of the ones that are the splashiest, sexiest entrepreneurship organizations, often you feel as an entrepreneur that you're too early stage for that yet. Like, oh, I can't join that incubator because I don't have X, Y, and Z, or I can't talk to that VC because I don't have this, that, this, or that. We need to take down those barriers. We need to create more systems to help people just even take their idea and put it to paper and believe that they could actually turn that into a business.
Those are some great thoughts right there. We certainly know, and we've had internally, we've had these conversations of how do we change the conversations to real actionable things that we can do to break down the barriers. Entrepreneurship, as we know it as a very privileged career. Not everyone can pursue entrepreneurship because of the path that it takes you. Um, any tips for founders when they're considering building their companies? I know it starts with the founders. The culture starts with the founders. Vision and all of that starts with the founders. So for those that are joining us as founders, any tips for them to keep these in mind?
Oh.
And I know you've seen the
Yeah.
hiring process. I know, like facilitating talent
Yeah.
going into companies. I think there's a lot to explore there from founders.
Totally, totally. So when I was working in venture capital, I think the biggest thing I learned from that experience is that VCs are definitely sinking their teeth into, sorry, there's a fly in my house. I'm sure you'll all find this entertaining. It's been driving me crazy for days. Days. I can't get this thing. So if you see me swatting, it's this one fly. Um, uh, what we learned in venture is that, like, yeah, you can, do your diligence on a business and think like, this is amazing, this business is going to make so much money, we want to invest in it. But at the end of the day, we're investing in people. And it's not so much like, oh, that person's awesome, they can build a business. It's that person is a great leader. They will be able to lead this business now, and they will be able to scale it to a 200-person team. And what that means is, like, do you have the ability and the humility to, like, support that many people with this vision? So I think that the greatest lesson I learned is that, like, you just have to be yourself. Like, you really have to be human. To build a great company, you need to see that that your most valuable asset is always going to be the people that you work with and that work for you. And that you will always be learning and growing as well. You're not going to be the same leader today as you're going to be in a year, as you're going to be, 5 years from now. And to be able to acknowledge that and allow your organization to grow with you, allow your team to grow with you, will be your greatest success. The like the companies that fail the fastest are often the ones, I always say, where the founders are standing in front of their business and holding it like a flag behind them, as if it's like, you know, supposed to represent their entire identity, and they're like, that is their claim to fame. The most successful businesses are the ones where the founder is standing behind the flag of their business with their team and pushing it forward. And that's the way I always try and operate with my business. And that's sort of the value that I see in a lot of some of our most successful entrepreneurs in Canada.
I absolutely see that. And I think, you know, part of it is also, and you talked about it, I think part of it is embracing that growth on an individual basis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I often tell entrepreneurs when they're starting out their companies, um, it starts with you, but as you grow, you're going to need to understand, you know, how to facilitate the growth of the company also internally, right? Leadership is a big piece. And I know there are several different programs and you know, CEO coaching and all of that that's available for entrepreneurs to access that. Do you think that there's value in it? Do you think that there's value in founders continuously engaging with these kind of programs?
Yeah, duh. Yeah. And that doesn't have to just be, you know, you don't have to always seek just, you know, a very specific program to do that. It comes back to like understanding your own mental health and checking in with yourself and knowing how you're doing. Because often if you're struggling and you're burning out, you're going to burn out other people around you as well. And so at least creating the space where of honesty, psychological safety, there are several components of what makes us like a workplace inclusive. Um, Psychological safety is one of them. And it's easy for the founder to say like, well, it doesn't apply to me. But as long as you feel, so what psychological safety means is that you feel comfortable being exactly who you are and sharing your ideas at work, because you know that those like your person and your thoughts and your contributions will be valued and heard by your team. And I think that if, as long as, you know, you can be cultivating that for other people, but you also have to be cultivating that for yourself. You also have to feel safe to say like, I'm not doing great right now, and like I might need to take some time off, and I need all of your support. Like that's, I mean, it's invaluable. You don't have to be perfect as an entrepreneur, and you don't have to always be stoic and strong.
Absolutely. Let me pause there and see if there are any questions and anything that the folks that are joining us today want to ask you. Feel
Sure.
free to
Yeah, I've been watching the chat group. I want to know if anyone has any burning
yeah,
questions.
feel free to drop it in the chat or even unmute yourself. Tiff?
Yeah,
Yeah.
hey, I just wanted to guess it's not fair for me to be impartial, but I just want to say that after all of these seminars that I've had the pleasure of sitting in, listening to all these wonderful speakers, Marianne, you just said, I think I've identified the most with, and I think it's most refreshing kind of take on the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Like right now, I loved hearing all about lifting the barriers and trying to include more people into this, into this environment. I loved what you said about, organizations picking and choosing who they're working with, and often choosing to work with, later stage people. I completely understand, resources are scarce, but it makes, it was a really refreshing point of view to hear, like give the little people a chance, give the people who, might not have the sales yet, might not, have their MVP yet. Like, I think that's really awesome because they need support too, and they need help as well. So just wanted to say thank you. I thought that was great.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Tiffany.
And Tiff, I know with MSBC you've done just that, and you guys are doing fantastic work. So we appreciate
Yeah,
all that effort from you as well.
It
thank
also makes
you.
the biggest difference. Like you're investing in someone at an earlier stage. Like their business might not work out, but they're going to gain the skills they need to then contribute, whether it is to their next business or another business. You're
Mhm.
leveling up the entire economy when you're investing in people to be self-starters. And so yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute your mic, drop it in the chat. We really want to hear from you and engage with you. I'm gonna call on David. I'm gonna see if he's actually listening today.
I am. You got me in the middle of eating my lunch. Hey, how are you doing?
Hi, David.
I think for me, it's really, there's this big conversation. I'm wondering to get your perspective because I think a couple of days ago I was reading that Communitech had put a big job board in San Francisco, actually calling for people to come back home.
Yeah.
I guess if you can talk to that a little bit, like what have you seen during COVID? Like, are you seeing people come home and want to stay home? Like, I have a couple of friends who moved back from San Francisco just because it made sense. And I was having conversations with them over the weekend. They're like, it's just not the same. Like, we want to go back. It's a little bit different there. What is your perspective? Do you think COVID with the job board and what people are trying to do are actually going to bring people back, or people are so accustomed to the lifestyle there now that they're probably just going to go back and forth more so?
Great question. So for those on the call that don't know anything about this, Communitech obviously is a incubator, accelerator, regional innovation center based in Waterloo, but they support a lot of organizations, a lot of startups all over Ontario. And we actually worked with them on this campaign, although we weren't public facing, but they actually bought like 4 or 5 billboards in downtown San Francisco that basically they were real clickbait. Literally, it looked like a Google search engine that basically said like moving to Canada, like I want to move back to Canada, or I want to move to Canada for work, or how can I work in Canada, something along those lines. And the way that we supported is that they needed someone to collect all of the data. They didn't want to double down with the help list. They also wanted to give people the opportunity to raise their hand on the help list if they were looking. So we actually tracked all of the people that they collected from that campaign, which was really cool. On the topic of people moving back. So the short answer, they want to move back. They're not going to make as much money here, so they stay. It's weighing, or they come back and they sacrifice their salary. Basically, like people are making way more, and not just because the cost of living is more in San Francisco, like they're making exponentially more in San Francisco. And so we are hearing both through that campaign as well as through our partnership with the C100. The C100 is an organization based in San Francisco that supports like any Canadians working in tech in San Francisco, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And they are getting an influx of requests from their members who are saying like, things kind of suck here right now. And what does it mean to move back? Despite all that interest, again, like the BDC came out with a report last week on executive compensation, which I believe is also reflective of not just executive compensation, but also compensation across our ecosystem. That really demonstrates that we are drastically underpaying a lot of our talent. And yeah, it is cheaper in Canada, but it's not that much. Like the amount that the differential between what a US product manager is making versus a Canadian product manager in a major city is so vast that it's actually hard to attract this talent back. And so we need to do a better job at attracting talent. We also need to do a better job at, like, one of the big and major problems is that Canadian entrepreneurs don't even know what standard salaries should be for some of these high-tech positions. We don't have a centralized resource that helps provide that communication so that we can start to benchmark how much all of our talent is making. And Prospect is trying to build that resource right now. This is not a plug because it's going to be free. It's just a fact, trying to fill that gap so we can start to like check ourselves and actually compete if we say we want to compete with the Americans.
I love that explanation. David, did that answer your question?
I think that's a great point. It's funny because that was his number one thing. He was like, outside of lifestyle, he's like, can someone pay me what I get paid down there? Especially if you're a software engineer. Like my sister's fiance is a software engineer, and it blew my mind how much he was making down there in his first couple of years of work. I'm like, oh my goodness, it just makes so much sense. So I think what Prospect is going to do with the tool, I think that's going to be fantastic because, to your point, Marianne, that's actually going to allow us to start benchmarking and start figuring out how far are we from actually making this and closing the gap. So that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you can't convince a software engineer. Like, think about it. You graduate from software engineering in Ontario and you find out you can make $200,000 starting salary in San Francisco working for Amazon, or you could make like $70,000 starting salary in Ontario. Like, what are you going to choose? Like, people, when you're graduating from university, like, lifestyle is not really your focus. You're like, I'll sleep on a mattress in a studio apartment to make $200,000 at this company. Like, that's not the focus. But one note I want to make is that we are seeing an influx of applications of those who are being affected by the adverse immigration policies in the US. The ban on H-1B visas has put out thousands of tech workers. I have spoken to Ivy League PhD graduates, like several this summer, like many different like engineers who've been working in tech in Silicon Valley for several months or several years, who are being thrown out of the country. It is ludicrous that the US would want to get rid of some of this talent, but it is our moment to capitalize. So if anyone here is like hiring or has the ability to, or is thinking about hiring an engineer to their team in the next couple of years or in the next year, you should definitely check out some of the applicants on the help list who are coming from the US.
Marianne, how do companies engage with prospect when they're putting up their job postings and vice versa on the help list?
Okay, good question. So we've tried in building prospect, we've tried to make it as easy as possible. The job board itself is only for scaling Canadian tech companies. That definition changes from person to person, but the way we've defined it is that you have your global headquarters is based in Canada. You're a private standalone company. You're founded after 2000. That helps us prevent the IT firm of 1983 from being eligible for the platform. You are building innovative technology. And what was the last one? I'm totally going to forget. Well, that summarizes. Oh no, you have to have between 5 and 500 employees, and we set the limit at 5 because we want to make sure that companies have the runway to actually pay these employees, and not just be starting out, which is almost hypocritical, Tiffany, to what I said before. But we do stay in touch with and support a lot of those companies, and we do make exceptions where we can partner with organizations like YSpace who can vet those companies and stand behind them. To get on the platform, you apply. Once you apply, you fill out a profile. The best part about the software we use is that once you submit your career page link, like wherever it might be on the internet, whether it's on your website or you're on AngelList or it's on LinkedIn, if you're like super rich and bougie, we will drag your job postings like automatically on an ongoing basis from your career page. So you never have to do a thing. We're just promoting your jobs on an ongoing basis, and that's that until you go public or you're acquired, or sadly, if you shut down.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's simple.
Okay, I know we're reaching the top of the session here. I have one more specific question, two more, but based on the conversation that we've had so far, Marianne, where do you think foundership is going? We're certainly seeing different kinds of founders, especially adding the layer of diversity and looking at founders coming from different. That fly is still here.
So drives me crazy. Yeah. So keep going. Yep.
Yeah. No. Looking at creating access for founders coming from different backgrounds, where there's a new face of foundership coming along. There are new mindsets of founders. So where do you think, from your perspective, foundership is evolving and going towards, and maybe what excites you about it?
Okay. Oh, another big one. I think over the past 10 years, we've become incredibly obsessed with these billion-dollar companies. And we've put that kind of at the peak of the mountain. Like, success in being a founder and building a company means like Warby Parker or Uber or whatever that might be. The funny thing is, and I won't go down this rabbit hole, like Uber still isn't profitable, even though they're public. Like, we've actually proved that the venture capital model might not work in many circumstances. I think the direction of foundership is moving more towards allowing people to think about what entrepreneurship looks like in whatever context they might be in, whatever business they want to build, and whatever works for them. We kind of got away from this, like where there's this difference between being like the owner of a small to medium sized enterprise versus the founder of a large scale tech company. And there is no shame. Also, there's probably better odds in building the business that you want to build, not the business that everyone expects you to build. And I think there's room for us to be more creative with how we are inviting different sectors, industries, and groups to the table to start to innovate in those spaces without expecting every single business to be $1 billion exit. If it is, I mean, that's amazing. And that obviously speaks to the model that that business had chosen. But if it's not, it likely is still moving the needle in innovation and in that space. I do know, like, one of the things I'm really excited about is this like food and beverage innovation project that Y-Space has taken on, because these types of programs are the ones that will churn out, yeah, maybe the $1 billion business, but also all sorts of other like super successful entrepreneurship opportunities that will change the way in which we experience that sector. And so I think we can start to innovate across all sorts of different pockets and invite all sorts of people to the table to build the kind of business they want, no matter what size that is, no matter where that is. Like my mom would say, so cheesy, the world is your oyster.
And you know, I'll add to that. One of my mentors that I respect a lot, you know, one thing that she mentioned was, if you're being an entrepreneur, you have the opportunity to shape the world that you want to live in. So certainly, I think, you know, going back to these entrepreneurs that, you know, they have the vision and you have the control over what you're building. So make sure you don't lose focus in that vision because of outside factors, and keeping that in mind. And obviously, there's so many ways to approach it. You don't always have to be venture backed. You don't always have to be bootstrapped. It really is kind of understanding what works for you. And there are support systems there to help you as well, right? There's wonderful work that you're doing with Prospect, the Markham Small Business Center, certainly Y-Space, DMZ, Venture Lab, all these different folks that are looking to support these entrepreneurs, because we definitely believe in the cause.
Yeah, well, I will say, which I think is really important, if you know, at some point on your journey, you're going to feel like things are going to feel tight. You're not going to have the, you know, the right amount of cash flow coming in, or even when you're kicking this off, you're going to feel like you need to raise some money to figure it out. And I think that's great. And you can figure it out, like wherever that money might come from. If you decide to take private dollars, you really need to be careful that you just don't take money for the sake of taking money, because when you take money, when you raise private dollars, I mean, you're basically marrying someone, because they are expecting you to grow that business for the next 10 years. And trust is everything. I mean, vetting that person, getting references on them, and like, you know, and also ensuring that they have your best interests at heart. It's really important. I've seen so many companies fall flat because they put the wrong investors on their cap table. They brought the wrong investors onto their board, and I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm just trying to raise this flag, because I think it's not waved enough to say, like, this is your business. It's valuable and it matters, and you don't need to compromise for anybody. Even if it means like scaling back what you're doing. Just like, I just watched a friend's business this summer basically fall apart over a really shady deal. And it was heartbreaking because he needed this money, and it just goes to show that you really need to trust the person, and just don't go down the road if you don't trust them, even if you need the money.
I appreciate that insight, because it really is such an honest opinion, that I think everyone should keep in mind and consider. As we wrap this up, Marianne, I do have one last question. I know I've given you several big questions, but this one hopefully is a fun one. If you can set a challenge for the next generation of entrepreneurs, what would it be? What would you want to challenge them on?
It's still a big question, Nafis.
But it's a fun one.
The thing that's at the front of my mind right now is The Social Dilemma. If you haven't watched the docudrama on Netflix, you absolutely should. They interview a ton of people that helped build the social media networks that we all use obsessively today, and talking about the impact of what those different systems, the impact of some of the smallest little pieces like buttons or infinite scroll on the way in which humans interact today. I think the biggest challenge I would have for the next generation of entrepreneurs is to really think about the impact that they are making with the technology they're building, not to just think about scale, how much money you can make and how many people's attention you can grab, but also like why this business matters and why this business is going to make a difference. Oh, from Lucy, it's called The Social Dilemma. It's on Netflix. It'll just change, it really will change your perspective on perhaps even the thing that you're building and how you are even articulate that to the world, because we do have a responsibility to build technology that is more humane, that takes, you know, the human mind, the human heart into consideration, and how we want to live and how we want to live together in this world. And that's the challenge for the next generation, because I don't know that in the past 10 years we've really put that at the forefront, and I think we're seeing the repercussions of that now.
Building businesses and technology with the human at the forefront. I love it.
Yeah.
Are there as we wrap it up, are there any final questions from the folks joining us?
I'll throw a question out there.
Awesome.
One thing that I find interesting through what you were saying, Marianne, was that you were saying that how important small business is and entrepreneurship and so forth. And maybe it's just my skewed view of retail and, you know, the business world. I just find that it almost feels daunting to go up against the big box stores, the big retailers, you know, I think we as a country feel very what's the word I'm looking for? Like the small mom and pop shops are gone. You know, that small small entrepreneur seems to, they can't compete with some of the big box stores, with the big retailers and so forth. So a lot of the small businesses are actually running their businesses through big industries. And so I find it was interesting that you said that it's really important for entrepreneurships to sort of that it's going to help get us out of the recession, but yet they're the ones that are most affected because they don't have the, you know, the legalities that, you know, the big lawyers to write the contracts to protect their interests. And they're the ones that are suffering the most right now. And they're the ones at jeopardy, you know, with Amazon being, you know, a huge retailer and so forth. So I'm just like, I did appreciate that one comment that, you know, innovators can bring new ideas, but it also feels difficult to put your product out there when there's so many, when consumers like to go with the comfortable big retailers, the big box, the big business.
Yeah. So is there a sorry, I totally agree. Is there a specific question that you have, or I can just comment on some of the things you shared?
Yeah, I guess if you could just sort of comment, because I do want to move into an entrepreneurship position. I think there's a lot of learning, a lot of growth, but I also think it's a high risk, right?
Yeah. I think there are definitely, in this pandemic specifically, there are definitely small businesses that have suffered a lot. I mean, I think we've all seen restaurants and stores shut down in our neighborhoods permanently, which is incredibly tragic to see. But I also know, and we've seen a lot of businesses flourish in this time. And I think despite the fact that Amazon might sell a similar product, they're still selling out online. My my partner's brother, basically my brother-in-law, he sells luxury toothpicks. You'd think that nobody cares about luxury toothpicks on the internet right now, or they could just get their toothpicks on Amazon, but he's like grown his business 800% during this time. So I think, yes, there are definitely certain businesses maybe to avoid right now, especially during a pandemic, if you're looking to kick something off. But there are things that big retailers just can't do. There are businesses that they're not focused on, and there are, there's still an appetite from consumers for like if you're thinking about building a consumer product, like there's still an appetite for the smaller business product, not just ordering things on Amazon. But it can be incredibly dissuading, because like if Amazon sells it, why would I sell it? But I think there's a movement towards like buying local and whatnot, which I think is awesome. We would be amiss to believe that that's how the entire world thinks. But it's worth digging into. There's lots of interesting information on the types of businesses that have flourished as a result of COVID. And it's interesting also to even see how Shopify has helped a lot of those businesses flourish. Like my local farmers market up here, I think sold more fruit this summer because they decided to go into an online model. You still have to go and pick it up, but before you would just go there and pay them cash and figure it out. And now you can actually order everything in advance. And they even said that their business flourished. So those are some of my thoughts and comments, which sits sort of maybe on both sides of the argument.
And I'll add to that, Marianne, for Lucy, I think this is why we exist as well, right? With Y Space, the small business centers, we want to help you maybe not make some of the mistakes that companies make in the early days, and survive and compete with some of these bigger companies that are out there. So certainly, I think look at your ecosystem, what's around you, and who's there to help you, because I think certainly there are people and organizations there to help entrepreneurs at that stage.
Thank you. Yeah, I do agree with you. I think I think there are opportunities right now, especially with so many businesses that unfortunately have failed, that there are even more opportunities now than before COVID to be an entrepreneur, having a more profitable business financial setup in place, right? I think there's great opportunities right now, but there's a lot of learning for me to go through in order to not make an investment in something that's not going to, flourish, right?
Absolutely. And Lucy, reach out to Whitespace if you think we could help you. I would certainly be happy to have a conversation offline from here.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. I think with that being said, we're at the top of the key. Any final notes, any final thoughts, Marianne?
No, I love that Lucy rounded it out on that, because yeah, entrepreneurship is not easy, but the first step is just investing your time. And the worst thing that can happen is that you're just going to learn, you're going to fail, you're going to learn something, and you're going to move on. But first, it starts with investing your time. And yeah, not to continue to plug Y Space. They're not paying me. I just think like promise. Like if you have like organizations like Y Space are there to make you feel heard and seen and supported. And so don't try and go at it alone. Like lean on some of those services out there and those communities out there where you can learn and grow alongside other entrepreneurs.